Hey, what's up, everyone? Are you ready to build out the Facebook Reactions UI? I know I'm ready. So if you want to follow along, just go to github.com/treehouse/Facebook reactions. When you get to the repo for the project, the first thing you'll see in the README is this big mockup. This is what we'll be building out. It's basically just one instance of a Facebook post or social media post with just a little bit of info in there, nothing crazy. But the real magic is this like button. We'll write some code so that when we hover over this like button, this menu with all these reactions will pop up and we can hover over each one. And it'll have a little bit of a animation. And this will be done with just HTML and CSS, so no JavaScript needed. Underneath the mockup, you will see some CSS variables, and these are just what we're going to be using to style up this UI. So if you want to follow along, let's just grab this big green code button, click copy, and you can use GitHub Desktop or your terminal. I'm going to use my terminal, and I'm going to clone down this project. So I'm going to cd to my desktop, and I'm going to git clone and paste in that link. And now I have the project on my desktop. I'm going to drag it to VS Code, and let's take a look at the files and directories that we have in here. So the first thing you'll see is master. So if at any point your code just doesn't work or doesn't look like mine, you can hop into master and see all the finished code. So if we view the index.html file inside the master directory in our browser, this is a finished product of what we'll be building. So it just looks like a standard social media post. And if you hover over this like button, you'll have these emojis that kind of mimic the way Facebook does their reactions for their posts. But the only thing is clicking on them won't do anything because we're not going to write any JavaScript. We're just going to get this functionality working with just CSS. So let's close out of this. And everything that we'll be doing is going to be inside of this starter directory. So let's take a look at what we have in here. Inside the index.html, it is basically empty, just our boilerplate code that links to our app.css file. And we have an empty title, which we'll just call Facebook Reactions UI. Also, in the styles, there is an app.scss file as well as an app.css file. I will be writing everything in SCSS, and I won't be doing anything complex with it. I'll just be using it for nesting. But if you'd like to follow along, there's really no learning curve to how I'll be using it. Just go to your extensions panel, type in Sass compiler, and you'll want to click on this third one called Live Sass Compiler by Glenn Marks. This is what I use. All you need to do is install it, and whenever you're inside of a directory with an app.scss file, all you need to do is hit this Watch Sass button at the bottom, and it'll compile everything we write into an app.css file, which is what our index.html file is using. If you do not want to use SCSS, you can still follow along. You just won't be able to nest the way that I do, and you can just write your code directly into your app.css file. But if you want to follow along with me, there's no learning curve, like I mentioned, to writing SCSS the way that I'm going to be using it here. And I'll try to explain how I use it as we go. So first things first, let's start building out our UI. And the easiest way to do this would be to pull up the mockup on the right. Or actually, let's bring the HTML on the right and the mockup on the left. Sweet. So let's start building this out. First thing I'll do is inside of our HTML, I'm just going to create one element for our entire UI. And I'll just call that Facebook post. Now let's break down this entire post. It looks like we have somewhat of a post header up here with a little bit of content. We have our post itself, and then we have this group of buttons. So let's create 3 separate child elements inside of our Facebook post container. For now, let's put some comments. I'll put post header because we'll need a post header. We'll need the post itself. And also we need our post interactions, which is our buttons. So let's start off with the header. We have a user image. We have a little bit of content right here. And then we have a couple of more buttons on the right. So I think for the image, for just this project's sake, I'll just leave that as a empty div. You can come back and add in your own image if you want, but I'll just create an empty div for this and I'll call it user image. Actually, we need to create the post header first. So post header, and I'll now create the user image. And then, like I said, we'll leave this empty. And then the next item in this header will be this info group. We'll call it info group. And inside of this, I'll have a span for the name. So I'll write span John Smith. Feel free to use your own name or another name. I'm going to create another span for the publishing time, which was 19 hours ago. And then outside of our info group, I'm just going to lay out our images. So you'll notice, so I forgot to go over the assets folder, but the assets folder has all of our images in it. It has our mockup, our background that we're going to be using, our 2 SVGs for our close and ellipsis icons, which we will use as just regular images instead of inline SVGs. And in our reactions directory, we have our angry, heart, laugh, like, sad, and our wow reactions. So let's go back into the HTML and we want to use this ellipsis icon. So we will go to assets and we'll click ellipsis.svg. And we can delete the alt attribute. We're not going to need that for this project specifically. And then I will toggle our close SVG. I can't type SVG, and I'll delete the alt attribute. So let's save. And we're not viewing the page live yet, so no worries. Once we finish writing out the markup, we'll take a look at what that looks like. So I think that's it for the header. So I'll close off the header. And now we have the post itself, which I'm just going to leave as an empty div called post. You can come back and add in an image or some text if you'd like, whatever you want to do. But for the sake of this demonstration, we'll just leave this empty. And for our post interactions, we'll create a div called post interactions. And inside we'll have 3 buttons. So I'll do button times 3. And if you're unfamiliar with what I just did, that's an emit shortcut. So you just type in button times 3 and it'll create 3 buttons. We got like, we have comment, and we have share. Now, one thing to note that this menu right here with the reactions will actually live inside of our like button. So let's go into the markup and adjust this just a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll create a div called reactions. And in here will be a span. We'll do 6 of them. So we'll do span times 6. And in each one of these, we will pop in our reaction images. So let's put each one of these spans on their own line. Sweet. And let's write image. And we'll do assets. And we'll do reactions. And the first one is like.png. And what I'll do is we'll also remove the alt attribute. We won't need these. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste this into all the spans, and then we'll just update the path name. So looks like the first one is the like button. Then we have the heart. So we'll change the second one to heart. The third one looks like it's wow. So we'll change it to wow. The fourth one is laugh. I'm not sure why my mockup keeps moving like that. It's kind of annoying, but sorry. So the second to last one is sad. And the last one is angry. All right, so we'll hit save. And believe it or not, I think that is actually everything we'll need for the markup. Yep, so we have our Facebook post. And inside of our post, we have our header, we have the post itself, and then we have our 3 buttons. And inside of the first button holds our container with all of our reactions. So I'll close out of the mockup for now. Let's view this in the browser. So I'll open this up with live server, and yeah, so it looks like we have our 3 buttons. We have all 6 reactions. We have our really, really big SVGs, and we have our content for the header. Sweet. So let's open this up on the side, and we'll get the Visual Studio Code opened up on the other side. And now we need to start styling this up a little bit. So let me open up the mockup just so that we can try to style it up accordingly. And I'll also open up our style sheet. I'll put the style sheet over here. I'll close this. Let me make this a little bit smaller so I can get to this watch Sass button. So if you are following along with me and you want to use the SCSS, make sure you download the live Sass compiler extension and then click on this watch Sass button when you have your app.scss file open. So I'm going to click it, and you should have this panel that comes up. Unfortunately, you can't close it. I like to put it at the bottom. If you do try to close it, it's just going to pop up as soon as you make a change to your SCSS file. But I just normally put it all the way at the bottom when I'm working with limited space like we are right now. So I will zoom in just a tad on the mockup. Well, it won't let me, so let me reopen it. There we go. Open this up on the right. Awesome. All right, so let's get started with building out the UI. You can either go back to the repository or go to the README and copy down these CSS variables. But these are the variables I mentioned earlier that we'll be using to build out the UI. So the first thing I want to do in my SCSS file is create a root and paste those in. I'm going to move the mockup to the bottom so we can see everything a little bit bigger. There we go. All right. This should work for now. So let's make the code a little bit bigger. Awesome. So we have our root and we pasted in all of our CSS variables. And if you're unsure how to use CSS variables, we'll use the first one now. We'll target the body and we'll give it a background image. Actually, we will use the variables in a bit. Let's set up the background image first. So we'll do background image URL and we'll navigate to our assets folder and then to thbg.png. Hit save and we'll see our new background in the browser. We want to give a min height to the browser window. We'll do 100 view height. Also, we want to center this in the page. So we'll use Flexbox for that. We can do a display, a flex. We'll align items center and we'll justify the content center also. I'll hit save and you won't notice anything yet because we have a lot of content. So I think that might be it for the body. So let's start tackling. Let's start tackling the Facebook post itself. So I'll create a Facebook post rule. I need to spell it right. There we go. And now we'll use a CSS variable. All right, background color. And to use a CSS variable, you just write the var keyword with a set of parentheses. And then you grab the variable that you want. And all your variables start with 2 dashes. So we'll grab the Facebook post BG variable and we'll paste it inside of those parentheses. Let's save, and now you should see that darker color for our actual post. I'm going to close this up. So let's give our post a width of 80% so that we have a little bit of spacing, which works fine. But if we had a wider browser, it would also just get way bigger. So let's also set a max width, and we can do a max width of 500 pixels, and it should keep it small. Awesome. There we go. So the next thing, let's start with the border radius and this border. So we'll do a border radius of 2 rem. And I think that looks okay. We'll add some padding also. We can do maybe 1 rem top and bottom, 2 rem left and right. And we'll add a border of 0.85 rem solid. And for the color, we'll set this up in a variable as well. We have Facebook post border. So I'll copy that. I'll paste it in there. Sweet. And it's a little hard to see, but we can also add some box shadow that can help. We can do 0, 12 pixels, 12 pixels. We'll do RGBA. We'll do black with a 0.15 opacity. And it's a little bit more visible. It's not meant to be super in your face. So this looks pretty good. All right. So I think for now that might be everything we need for our Facebook post itself. So now let's work on the first item in our Facebook post container. So inside of our Facebook post, we have Facebook header, the post, and then the interactions. So let's work on the Facebook header. So in the mockup, it looks like everything is in a row. So this will be perfect for Flexbox. And this is also where I'll be starting to nest. So with SCSS, we can stay in the same rule and just write post header. And this is the same as saying, this is the same as writing Facebook post header. But we don't have to create a new rule. We can nest it within the initial rule because post header is a child of Facebook post. So in the header, we'll give it a display of flex, and by default, the direction will be row. So you can see it kind of shifts some things around a little bit. We'll align the items center, and we'll justify the content. Actually, we'll keep the content as is. So let's first tackle the user image. So because user image is a child of post header, we can also nest that in there as well. And like I said, you can come back and add an image in here if you want. For this demonstration, I'm just going to create an empty div that has like that white background color. So we'll do background color, and we can reuse another variable for this. So we got Facebook post color. We'll just copy that because it's also a white color. So I'll put that in there. I'll give it a height of, let's do 40 pixels, a width of 40 pixels. We'll save it. And we'll do a border radius of 50%. Now we can't see it yet because there's a ton of content in this header and it's getting squished. So let's jump ahead a bit and target the actual images that we used for the ellipsis and the close icon. So I'll close down this little code block for our user image, and we're staying inside the post header, and we're just going to target image, and we're going to give each image a width of, let's say 15. Let's just do 1 rem. Sweet. Now we can see our user image again because we made these icons a little bit smaller. And you might be wondering how we're going to get those icons white since they are SVGs and we're not using them as inline SVGs. And one really neat trick, since they're black icons, we can just write filter and we can invert them a full invert. So we'll do invert 1, we'll hit save, and now the icons are inverted. They're white. So let's get away from the images for a little bit. I only wanted to tackle that really fast and jump ahead so that we could start seeing the UI. So let's go back to our user image. So in the mockup, we got some space between that user image and the user info. So let's give it a margin right of 1.25 rem. Sweet. Now, if we go back to the HTML, we have this div right here with the class of info group that holds our spans. So now let's close this user image block and type in, what was it called? Info group. So we'll do info group. And in here, we want to set the color, and we'll do that same variable we used for the user image. We'll just do Facebook post color. We'll hit save, and you see it's white. Now, it looks like the name is above the publish time. So since we're using spans and these are inline elements, we can target the span inside of that info group and give it a display of block. This will put them right on top of each other. So there is a little bit of spacing. There's actually less spacing in the mockup than there is in the live server above the publish time. So let's target that second span. We can do an ampersand, and this is the same as just saying span. So I'll do ampersand or span and target the last of type. So we're targeting that last span, and we want to put a font size of 0.7 rem and a margin top of -0.5 rem. Sweet. Let's do 0.33 rem instead. Okay, that looks a little better. So now we have a little bit of spacing between the name and the publish time. So let's close the info group because I'm pretty sure we're finished with that now. And then the only other element inside of our post header are those two images. So what we could do is target the very first image, which is the ellipsis, and give it a margin left of auto, because the post header, which is the parent of these images, has a display of flex, and doing that will just push it all the way to the opposite corner. So we'll do the ampersand again, which is the same as saying image. We'll do the ampersand and target the last of type, because we want, actually, I'm sorry, first of type, because we want to target the first image. And we'll do a margin left of auto. And as you can see, it pushed the images all the way to the right, which is perfect. While we're also targeting this first image, let's give it a margin right of 1 rem. And now we got a little bit of spacing between both of these icons. And to be honest, I think that might be all we need for the header, at least for now. So let's close up this header block and let's start working on the next item inside of our HTML, which is the post. And this won't be anything fancy. This will be just one big block. But you can go back and add in an image or some text or anything you'd like. So I'll target post. And again, we're still inside of our Facebook post rule because this is a child of the Facebook post container. So what we'll do is we'll just give it a margin top and bottom of 1.5 rem, and we can just do auto for the right and left. And sweet, we have a little bit of spacing. Let's give it a width of 100% and a height of 350 pixels. Awesome. Now it doesn't have, we can't see it yet because there's no background color. So let's give it a background color and we'll set it to a variable because we do have this named just Facebook post. So I'll copy that and I'll paste it inside. And now we see our post. So I think the only other thing we need to do is just give it a little bit of border radius. We can do 1.5 rem. And I think that looks pretty good. And that's it for the post. There's really not much to that one. Like I said, you can go add in your own content if you want afterwards. So now let's toggle the post interactions, which, if you remember, is just a container holding 3 buttons. And one of the buttons has a bunch of icons in it, which you can see here. So let's go inside of here, and it looks like in the mockup, these buttons are in one row. So we'll use a display of flex on the parent again. So we'll do display, flex, and it does default to row, so we don't have to specify that. And sweet, now you can see they're kind of all on in one row. What we'll do is let's target the button and then target the div with the class of reactions on the inside. And we'll just set it to a display of none really quickly. Reactions. Okay, sweet. I just wanted to do that just temporarily so that we can kind of style out our buttons. So let's go back into the button rule. We'll give them a width of 100%. And because flex is by default set to no wrap, these will not wrap on another line. So they're all going to stay within their own line. If we gave our display flex wrap, if we gave our post interactions a flex wrap of wrap, they'll each be on their own line, taking up the 100%. But it's defaulted to no wrap. So let's actually give them a gap of 0.25 rim. So you got a little bit of spacing. And now let's add some padding. We can do padding 1 rim, maybe do a border radius of, let's do 2 rim. Oh, that's way too much radius. Let's do 0.5 rim. I think that looks pretty good. Let's do a border of none. And let's now set the background color and color. So if we go up to our variables, we'll see we have Facebook post button BG, we have a Facebook post button color, and then we have the Facebook post button BG hover. So let's grab the button BG. And inside of our button, we'll give it a background color. We'll use the var keyword and paste that in. And now we'll do color, and we'll type in Facebook post button color. Awesome. So pretty much our UI is complete. Let's actually add a hover state to these buttons real fast. We can do a cursor of pointer to get that pointed cursor, and on hover, and I'm going to use the ampersand again. This is basically the same as just saying button. It basically gives a reference to the element that you're styling. But I'll do and I'll do the hover. And what we'll do is we'll just update the background color. And we have that variable Facebook post button BG hover. So let's see if that worked. Awesome, it does. Let's give it a little bit of a transition. We can give the button a transition of background color 0.3 seconds ease. There we go. It's a little bit more subtle. All right, sweet. So the UI for this is done. Now we need to work on the reactions, which are these guys down here. This should be pretty simple. So what we'll do is we want to grab just this first button on hover, not any of the other ones. So if we look, we have our button rule right here. And what we can do is, let's do this underneath the reactions nest. We'll write and we'll do first child, or I'm sorry, first of type hover. And for now, let's give this a background color of red just to see if we're toggling the correct button. Okay, so comment and share still look gray, and sweet. Like is turning red when we hover over it. So we have access to the right button. So what do we want to do? Well, first off, let's go and turn the display none on these reactions off so that we can see them. Now, we want to position this menu absolutely relative to its parent, which is this like button. So in order to do that, we'll give the button a position of relative, and we'll give the reactions menu a position of absolute. We'll do left 0. And because everything is in a column, let's give it a display of flex. It'll default to row. Awesome. And now let's target each image inside. We can nest that by writing image, and we'll just do a width of 50 pixels. It's a little small, maybe 60 pixels. I think that looks pretty good. So the reactions menu, let's give that a background color because it looks like we have one in the mockup. We'll do a background color. And of course, we do have a CSS variable for it. Facebook reactions background. So go up there, copy that. And where were we? Line 100. We'll paste that in. And now you see the subtle background color. Let's give it a padding of 0.25 rem, something pretty small. And now we'll do a border radius, and we can do something 50 pixels. I think that looks pretty good. Let's adjust the top. We're gonna leave it at 0. We're gonna leave it here by default, but while we have it visible, let's see if we can't style this up. Let's do like 140%, a negative 140%. Looks pretty good. Let's do a little bit higher, maybe 142 or 143. You can come in here and play with this as much as you need. The only thing I'm noticing, it's pretty subtle, but it does not look like the images are centered in here. And because we did a display of flex, we can also align the items center and justify the content center. Actually, that's not working. Let's see if there's some extra margin or padding going on. Okay, so what I think's going on is there's some extra spacing in the span. So what we can do is give a display of flex to the span. So we'll do span, and we'll nest this image in the span because that's where it lives. And we'll just do a display of flex. We'll align the item center and justify the content center as well. There we go. Now it looks a lot more uniform. I do want to give a little bit of a gap to the images. Let's do like 0.25 rem. Actually, this would go on the reactions container. So let's paste that. Okay, nice. We have a little bit of a space between each one now. Let's also make the images just a tiny bit smaller. Let's do like 57 pixels. There we go. It looks a little better. Let's do 58. Awesome. And since we updated that, let's also make this a little bit smaller. We'll set the top to negative 135% or 25%, 35. I think 35 looks pretty good. Let's do like 33. Okay, sweet. Okay, so remember that negative 133% because I'm going to set this to 0 now. And I'm going to give it an opacity of 0. And I'm going to set the pointer events to none. And if you're unfamiliar with pointer events, it basically just removes the events that your cursor or your pointer is going to trigger when it hovers over something. So it's basically going to act like it doesn't exist. So what we want to do is go back to our button hover. So when we hover this button, what do we want to do? Well, we can target the reactions container inside of this button, and we want to say top negative 133%. We want to bump the opacity back up to 1, and we want to give it access to all the pointer events again. So we could do pointer events auto. So now if we hover over, sweet, it comes back and it goes away. But if you are familiar with how Facebook works, we have to hover over this for a few milliseconds before this menu pops up. So how can we do that? Well, first off, there's no animation to this. It's just happening instantly. So we can go ahead and fix that. If we go back to our initial reactions rule, we can give it a transition. We can do the top 0.3 seconds ease. We can do opacity 0.3 seconds ease as well. And this should give us a little bit of an animation. Sweet. Now we want to delay that animation, right? So after our animation timing of 0.3 seconds, we can do 0.3 seconds again for the animation delay. So I'll do that for both the top and opacity. And now if we hover over, after a subtle 0.3 second delay, our animation pops up. Let's also change the opacity a little bit faster. Okay, sweet. I like that. So now we want to have somewhat of a scale animation as well as pushing the emoji up whenever we hover over it. And that's also pretty easy to do. We can just target the image that's inside of our span and do a hover state on it. And what we'll do is we want to transform. We want to scale like up to maybe 1.2. And we want to translate Y maybe negative 25, or maybe let's do 30%. Or I'm sorry, pixels. And we'll hit save. Let's actually give it a transition now. So in the initial image rule, we'll write transition. We can do 0.3 seconds. Actually, we'll write transform 0.3 seconds ease. Sweet. So let's see if that worked. All right. So our menu comes up. Awesome. It looks like it somewhat works. It's going a little high. So if we have our cursor down, it almost looks like it bounces. So let's take this negative 30 and maybe do negative 20. Sweet. I think this looks pretty good. Awesome. So that's about it. We just basically rebuilt the way that Facebook reactions look with just HTML and CSS. I do think it would be pretty neat to have a little bit more functionality in here with some JavaScript, to where if maybe we click this heart, it'll show that a user has hearted the post, which can be done through some simple DOM manipulation. You could even make this comment section work, where you can have a form field pop up if you click this, or maybe even add a little bit more UI for the share button. But if these are things that you'd like to see in the future, just let us know, and maybe we can make a part 2 to this webinar where we add a little bit of JavaScript to this project. But I hope you had fun, and I hope you learned a lot, and we'll see you guys in the next one. So have fun and happy coding.